Orech yami maspiehu v'yarehu v'shuatu. Orech yami maspiehu v'yarehu v'shuatu.
Once you're put in, to come back. You're welcome to take a seat. If I can remind everyone to please turn off your cell phones for the service. And the media family has been seated, and there are plenty of extra chairs, so please don't be bashful to have a seat.
I'm going to begin our service with Psalm 23. It's often associated with funerals, but the beautiful thing about it is we sing it on Shabbat because it speaks of rest, menucha. We hope that David finds menucha. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binotesh yarbitzeni al mei menuchot ינעלני נפשי שובר ינחני במגלי צדק למען שמו גם כי ילך בגצל מוות לא יירא רע כי אתה עמדי שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צוררה תשעת בשמן ראשי כוסי רוויה אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Please join me in Psalm 23 in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. Guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Our God and God of our ancestors, our rock and our redeemer, 1,000 years in your sight are as a passing day, an hour of night. Our generations come and go while you endure forever. We are always in your hand, O Lord, in death as in life, trusting in your love and in your decisions. O Lord in heaven, strengthen those who mourn the loss of David Hahn. Help them to look beyond this moment, to realize that death cannot destroy the bonds of everlasting love. Sustain them with the knowledge of our faith, that you do not abandon souls to the grave, that you do not allow your faithful to suffer oblivion. You, O Lord, have taught us the way of life. Through you we gain eternity. And let us say, Amen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rabbi Chaitovsky, Rabbi at BMH BJ. There are a number of people who are going to be speaking today, people who were members of David's family, people who knew and loved him in a way perhaps that many others might not have. I'm going to put the program, if you want to call it that, into context. A colleague living in Israel recently shared the following anecdote with me. And I've never been able to use this story before at a funeral. He walked into the principal's office for a meeting to discuss his child's progress. There was a little sign on the desk, and this is in Israel, and it said, Chashuv, which means important. My colleague thought to himself, that's a little arrogant. The principal identifying himself with a sign on his desk saying, important. The principal saw the puzzled look on his face and said, oh, I've seen that you noticed the sign, but you have to read it right. It doesn't say chashuv because there are no vowels. It says chashov, which means think. It was like an IBM Think ad from many years ago. And he said there's nothing more important than that. If there's one thing that everyone, even those who might have known David Hahn of blessed memory only casually, would agree with, it's that David Hahn, husband, brother, father, grandfather, Navy veteran, mathematician, bridge player, lawyer, city councilman, deputy district attorney, first Jewish senator in the Colorado State Senate, was a thinker. He was blessed with a keen, brilliant, and sharp mind. And he employed an almost Solomonic wisdom in every facet of his life. This was especially the case in his legal career, which spanned more than 60 years, where otherwise smart and even brilliant witnesses would often wilt under one of his penetrating and legendary cross-examinations. The Talmud tells us that upon arrival at the gates of heaven, each one of us is given a test, a sort of cosmic entrance exam, and is asked 6 questions. Each one of these questions represents a probing not just of our accomplishments, but of our overall character. 3 of the 6 are, did you conduct your business with honesty and integrity? Did you work for the world's redemption? Did you engage in the pursuit of wisdom? To these 3 questions, I believe David will have the best answers possible. Working backwards, did you engage in the pursuit of wisdom? I believe we already established how very smart David was. But the question doesn't focus on knowledge, it focuses on wisdom, which I always think of as knowledge refined by experience. David was blessed with the smarts to recognize the role that every experience in life would play in acquiring wisdom. It served him well, and he was happy to share his wisdom with you, but you had to seek it out from him. He was not an aggressive, I'll show you kind of person, although, truth be told, more than a few people were indeed shown. Did you work for the world's redemption? David did indeed seek to redeem the world, at least the immediate Colorado world. His work across the aisle in the state Senate resulted in advances in landmark legislation on behalf of health insurance for state employees, hospitalization for those with mental illness and challenges, Colorado's sovereignty law, and the decriminalization of abortions performed by medical professionals. For his 90th birthday, the governor proclaimed a statewide David Hahn Day in recognition of these efforts and many others to improve the life of Coloradans. Did you conduct your business affairs with honesty and integrity? In meeting with the family yesterday, those who were there either in person or by phone mentioned how absolutely ethical and moral David was, not only in his legal or professional pursuits, but in every area of his life. Living with ethics and morality is not always easy, but because he was blessed not only with knowledge, but also wisdom, he was able to make the choices, and he was able to explain the choices very necessary in living life. He certainly did love life. And in this regard, he can echo the words of the psalmist who said, Lo amut ki ahya. I will not die, but I will live. David lived a long and fruitful life. I'm not sure that he was ready to die. Whenever you met him, he would always seem to indicate that there was so much of life that was left to live. And in this regard, there's another passage in the Talmud that talks about another question that is asked. For those who choose to live an ascetic kind of lifestyle, divorced from the beauty and the joys of the world, something David could never imagine doing. The Talmud says that a seventh question will be asked. And in the words of a famous 19th century German Orthodox rabbi, Samson Raphael Hirsch, he couched the question as, did you enjoy my Alps? Did you take the time to see the beauty in the world around you? Did you engage with the activities that make for what we would call a full and complete life? I knew David, didn't know him well, rarely saw David because he didn't really hang out in the same places that I hung out in, most notably my synagogue. But he was, without a doubt, a loyal Jew, a proud Jew, and he did a great job in transmitting some of those Jewish values and Jewish ideals to the members of his family. From what I heard yesterday, he certainly enjoyed, if not the Alps, then the geography and the topology of Colorado in every single way. We're going to have his children who are going to say a few words. I'm first going to call upon Stephen, who'll be joined by Roxanne. And then a grandson, Ted, is going to speak. And I think Sherry is going to say a few words as well.
Cantor Goldstein, it's a beautiful psalm. Thank you. Rabbi Matovsky, thank you. Just have two announcements. There's a public participation moment, and I'm probably going to cook. So, no surprise there. The rabbi touched on some points about Dave Hahn, and I'd like to provide a few more insights about my dad, who, in his own way, is a Renaissance man with wide interests and expertise in several areas. He was a teacher, an athlete, an artist, a public servant, one hell of a good lawyer, and an always loving father. Dave loved being a teacher, and he especially loved teaching his grandchildren. After college, Dave taught electronics and bombing logistics at Lowry Air Force Base. On one field trip, Dave and his class went to Nevada and witnessed a nuclear explosion. Being the risk taker that Dave was, he drove to the blast site until the needles on his Geiger counter peaked, at which point Dave quickly turned around and sped away. Dave also taught criminal and municipal law at the University of Denver Law School, the same school Dave's father attended, my grandfather. Teaching for the grandchildren started shortly after Sam Hill's bar mitzvah, when Dave took his whole family to a small town outside of Mexico City for vacation. The family vacationed there every year for more than a decade. And every morning after breakfast, Dave held class with his grandchildren for about an hour. His courses ranged from physics to chemistry to criminal law and math. Dave loved math. He claimed the only foreign language he knew was algebra. Dave was also an athlete and a fitness junkie. He boxed, played soccer in college. He was the pitcher on a lawyer's softball team. I remember being on vacation, and Dave was in a competition to see who could hold their breath underwater the longest. Dave stayed underwater 30 seconds longer than the runner-up, so there would be no doubt who the winner was. Dave loved playing basketball at the YMCA. Donna Mandel told me that when Dave was in the legislature, she had to pull him away from games when he needed to vote on legislation. Everyone on the basketball court knew Dave. And Dave met Gene Ogle at the YMCA. Gene was a young Vietnam vet, and Dave paid for Gene's college education and gave Gene a job that he stayed in for over 30 years. Gene was like a member of our family. Dave loved the Y, and at the age of 72, he quit playing basketball. I went with him to clean out his locker. It was a sad day for Dave, but he did not give up on fitness. Dave Hahn is also an artist and a collector of art. Dave carved marble for more than 15 years in Marble, Colorado. He refused to explain his art. He just enjoyed the act of carving. One of his pieces is on display at Veterans Park and Highlands Ranch. The other sculptures are on display at my home and my sister's home. And anyone who came into the office was overwhelmed by Dave's collections of paintings. Dave Hahn was also a public servant. At age 17, he dropped out of high school and enlisted in the U.S. Navy during World War II, where he served in the Pacific on a destroyer. Dave also worked at Los Alamos Nuclear Laboratory. And after law school, Dave became a deputy district attorney in Arapahoe County. At the DA's office, Dave prosecuted a case against several Arapahoe County sheriffs who were burglarizing businesses at night. That took some nerve. Dave was elected to the Aurora City Council and later was elected to the Colorado State Senate. But these roles did not go to Dave's head. One day, Dave and my mother were visiting a family friend. These friends had a young daughter, and her parents prompted her to say hello to Senator Hahn. She responded by saying, "Hello, Janitor Hahn," or whatever your name is. From then on, we sometimes referred to Dad as Janitor Hahn. He loved it. As a public servant, Dave also had to play politician and run for office. I have one of Dave's campaign brochures. On the brochure, Dave used a picture that appeared in the Denver Post after he had won an important First Amendment protest case for protesters at the state capitol. The caption reads, "You should elect this man." But if you look at the photo, you can see that Dave's back is on here. It's not his face. You can't tell who this man is. Who uses a picture like this for their campaign? And this is the public participation part. Who uses this?
Dave Hahn.
What?
My daddy.
Yes, Dave Hahn would do something like that. Dave was known by many people as a lawyer's lawyer. Dave loved the practice of law, and he practiced for 60 years. Dave kept his game strong until he was 89 years old. I had the honor and pleasure to work with my dad for 18 years. Dave spent most of his career working on 17th Street, fairly prestigious. He was in the office 6 days a week and usually there by 5:30 a.m. The first thing Dave did each day was to make a pot of coffee, take it down to the mailroom, and to share it with the postal workers. Dave was never too important to be kind. Dave worked hard to build his practice and started one of the first municipal bond firms in Denver. He helped form the National Association of Bond Lawyers and the Arapahoe County Bar Association. He frequently went to the Arapahoe County Bar Association retreats in Las Vegas, where he claimed it was the best place to get his ethics credits. The first time I went to court with my father, I was probably 6 years old. I remember talking to the judge, and that was one of the first times in my life that I heard over and over, "Are you going to be a lawyer like your father?" Well, I have seldom met any lawyers like my father. He wasn't just smart. That's nothing special for lawyers. As Alan Tenenbaum would say, Dave was always 3 steps ahead of the other lawyers. And that was true because he worked hard and he was smarter and he knew it. And sometimes he made a point of it. He had amazing cross-examination skills and juries loved him. I remember one trial where Dave was cross-examining a lawyer who later became the chairperson of the American Bar Association. The back and forth between them was intense. I turned to another lawyer in the gallery and asked him what he was doing there. And he responded, "I'm just here to watch the sparks fly." Those were good days. And I loved working with my father. Dave often expressed he had a blessed life to be born in the United States, to live in Colorado, to work at something he loved. I truly believe that I am the luckiest person I know to have had Dave Hahn as my father. And I can see the impact that Dave has had on many of the people here. Aren't we lucky to have had Dave in our lives? I love you, Dad. This is my lovely partner, Roxanne.
Dave was my friend, and he was my political buddy. We both loved politics. He was kind and generous and a lifelong Democrat. As a senator, he worked extensively across the aisle. However, his kindness and tolerance stopped if your politics led to taking away fundamental human rights. At that point, he was pretty direct and appropriately intolerant. I was honored to be holding Dave's hands as he passed. And as we were moving our hands, listening to jazz, that he so loved jazz music, my words to him were, "You lived a great life, and you are deeply, deeply loved. I'll miss you, my friend."
Here's Ted.
When I was a sophomore in college, I once called Dave Zato, as we called him, to wish him a happy birthday. The call lasted a total of 45 seconds. He wasn't one to mince words, and I prepared my remarks in that same spirit. Dave Hahn was an incredible man, and I could not have asked for a better grandfather. Having him in my life, I can say it was an incredible privilege. I'm truly blessed. Thank you.
I apologize, but I have to take issue with my brother here.
You know it.
You may be the luckiest boy here today, but I am the luckiest girl here today
Okay.
to be the daughter of Dave Hahn, who was my father, my best friend, and my mentor. I want to thank all of you here today for supporting us. On behalf of the Greater Hahn, Pels, Featherston Hill, and White family, thank you for being here. Our hearts are really broken, but it's a wonderful thing to celebrate Dad. He not only did good deeds throughout his life, but he made good choices, and he taught all of us to do the same. Teaching someone to make good choices is not an easy thing, and it's not simple, but Dad helped to improve and heal our world every day. Now, this is the part where I say I am the luckiest girl here, so we'll skip over all of that. And I will not be talking about his law practice because I certainly didn't, and I'm certainly proud of my brother for his beautiful eulogy of our dad. Thank you. He did, I don't know if you mentioned the twinkle in his eye.
Thank you.
Or his devilish sense of humor. He did have a devilish sense of humor. And he could rip someone up in a cross-examination. And he could elbow a news anchor in the eye during a basketball game. But he was careful never to demean a human being. He taught us to be careful with our language. And there's a story that he loved to tell. He was playing football and an opponent muttered a curse word, which was something stronger than poop. And one of the coaches said, and Dad stole this quote from him, "You just had something in your mouth that I wouldn't put in my pocket." As a parent and a grandparent, Dad seldom skipped an opportunity to turn a moment into an educational experience, especially as Steve has described to you. during our visits to Ixtapan de la Sal in Mexico. When I was in elementary school, Dad used to take me on Sunday drives through eastern Colorado. You know, now they call it Aurora. And we would talk about whatever we saw out the car window. One day I was trying to show off. I was in third or fourth grade, and I was attending Hillel Academy, where we learned biblical Hebrew and English at the same time. So I thought I would show off by translating for him. And I started translating the begats, you know, and Enoch lived so many years and begat Mesushelach. And Mesushelach lived so many years and begat Lamach, and so forth and so on. And it was really easy because the words were so repetitive. And at the end of my translation, Dad, driving, said to me, "Do you know what begat means?" And I said, he was the father. And then I received a first very detailed explanation of procreation in detail. I never translated for him again. But I did manage unintentionally to get him back on another car ride. Mom, Dad, Steve, and I were driving over a windy mountain pass. And, you know, if you want to ask us later, we can tell you about how our parents drove, but it's not appropriate at their graves. And I usually got car sick and was laying across the back bench. And I learned to read to keep me from looking out the window and being afraid. I was about 10 or 12. My parents never edited what we read. And I was reading Rosemary's Baby when I came across a word that I had never seen before. And I called up to the adults in the front seats, "What does aversion mean?" And there was a gasp. The car swerved a little bit. There was silence. And Dad finally answered, "A virgin is someone who has never had intercourse." My father got Steve once as well. I'm sure many times. We were at the St. Louis airport, and Steve was drinking at a drinking fountain. And Dad waited and walked up to him and asked, "Does it taste familiar?" And I don't know if Steve answered anything more than, "Huh?" when Dad proceeded to explain to him sewage treatment and the eastern flow of water from Colorado. Dad taught us to love life and to love nature. Every morning on our trips to Cancun, Steve, Jamie, Roxanne, and I would meet Dad at the edge of the beach, actually overlooking the beach, and we would sit outside for a half an hour to 45 minutes and watch the sunrise. And when the sun rose, Dad would say, "Isn't life wonderful? Or isn't that beautiful?" I'm going to miss my daddy every day, but I know that nature will comfort me. Adapting one of his favorite quotes from Little Abner, which I'm really not going to adapt because it doesn't quite work that way. But Dad used to say, "I wish I was half the man my mammy was." His favorite Little Abner quote. Today, I opened the drapes in our hotel room and I looked at the front range lighting up with the eastern sun. And I heard my daddy say, "Isn't that beautiful?"
After the President of the United States and the United Nations, it's my privilege to present this flag in honor of his service to the United States Armed Forces.
We had plenty with Joe.
Lifelong Democrat.
Well, otherwise we couldn't accept it. Yeah, they're confused.
Yeshov Afar al Haaretz Kishaya. Ruach Tashuv El Elohim Asher Mitana. Dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns unto God who created. Lech l'shalom. Go to your peace. Lech v'shalom. Go in peace. So the tradition is that we used to tear clothing, and actually Sherry, I think, had intended to wear a garment that she would have been willing to tear. The fact is, in the ancient world, people didn't have wardrobes. They had one or two items of clothing, and to rip one of them as a sign of grief was a serious statement, it was a serious investment. But we don't do that, but we still have the tearing of a garment or a representation of a garment. That's a ribbon. So I'm going to ask you to rise, Steve and Sherry. We're going to make a blessing together. Everyone is going to answer Amen to the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan ha'emet. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the world, who we believe is a righteous judge. I'll ask you to tear. We'll ask family members, well, it's almost everyone here. Family members are going to have an opportunity to place earth into Dave's final resting place. We consider this a chesed shel emet, which means an altruistic act of kindness. We have no expectation that Dave is going to do this for us. It's considered in our tradition to be really one of the highest levels of extending kindness possible. There's no tziduk today. We're not doing tziduk. You take this one. Yes. No worries. We're gonna cover the entire call. Okay. Cover the Okay. When you get tired, we'll take over, all right? Ladies and gentlemen, Steve, do a little bit more. Should do some of this work, right? We can all gather around again at our seats. We're going to have the words of the mourners' fathers that are going to be offered by Stephen and Sherry. And give it another minute to soup it. Shovel.
say Kaddish in the El Malek and then come back and fill it all the way up? What do we do there? Come back, okay.
So the mourners are going to say the Kaddish, and we're all going to answer Amen. I'm just going to say one thing about answering Amen to any blessing, but especially the Kaddish. Amen is a three-letter word. They say that it stands for, it's a contraction of three words, El, Melech, Ne'eman. That God is the trustworthy ruler of the world, always in control, trustworthy ruler. When we say Amen to a blessing, we propel the blessing into the universe, and we help underscore and energize whatever the message of the blessing is. So we say the mourners Kaddish, the mourners are going to say that we answer Amen at the appropriate time. We are sort of putting our hand up and we're voting in favor of the sentiment being expressed in the Kaddish. That sentiment has nothing at all to do with death. The sentiment has everything to do with life. That's why we're gathered here in community. We are saying goodbye to someone who influenced our lives and who will remain in our lives. But we also recognize that we have lives to live. And in the faith and in community, we're able to say Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, which means that I will make the name of God as great as I can, even though I have every reason right now to perhaps take a step away from that. But because community is here, it gives an opportunity for the mourner to stand and say those words, and the community is like going to pick up his hand and say, yeah, right on. That's true. Amen. We can support that. That's one of the reasons Kaddish is not said officially without a community. There's no one there to respond and buttress the sentiment, then it loses some of its effect. So we're going to say the Kaddish, and we'll all answer Amen, and you'll follow my lead for the Yehei Shmei Rabbah line as well. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shmei Rabbah. Amen. V'yomah v'yirach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayecho v'yamecho v'chol beit Yisrael v'adalah v'zman kariv v'liru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah v'barach le'olam v'lomei olmaya. Barach v'yishtabach v'yitboar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitatar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shenei l'kusha b'richu le'ela mikol gerchatza shirasa tushbachasa v'nechamasa ta'miran v'yolma v'meru. Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah Nish Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'meru. Amen. Oseh Shalom V'mroma Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'meru. Amen.
It's my privilege to sing the memorial prayer, the El Maleh Rachamim. And I want to say, if you look around the cemetery, you will not see another stone like this one. It's really incredible, unusual.
Dave picked
Picked it out, of course. That's why, instead of writing a requiem, he picked it out. El Maleh Rachamim Shochen Amiromim Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanefei HaShechina במעלות קדושים ודיורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת דוד בן שמואל רפאל ורות שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן או בגן עדן תהי מנוחתו אנא ברחמים הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר amen.
God exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure. To the soul of David Hahn, David, the son of Shmuel, Raphael, and Ruth. The Lord in heaven, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds he performed in the land of the living. May his soul be ever bound up in the bond of our lives. The Lord is certainly his portion. May he ever rest in peace. Let us all say, Amen. Just a couple of announcements about what's going to take place following the conclusion of our service. There is going to be a brief period of visitation over the next 3 days, and I use that word specifically. Steve and Roxanne are welcoming people to their home, and I think most of you know the address, but in case you don't, it's 3273 South Niagara Street, off of Hamden and Monaco, and that will be starting after the interment here till about 6 o'clock this evening. Tonight, there's a service at our synagogue in honor of Purim. They're going to make an effort to attend the service at our synagogue this evening in our chapel, and anyone who is with them is invited to come to that service as well. And then tomorrow and Friday, there'll be a visitation period from 3 in the afternoon until about 6 in the evening. But there's no other services at the house. And of course, your visit and words of comfort to the family. Very much appreciated. And of course, sharing memories of David as you move in. It's another time on our way of observing our protocols for remembering those who are no longer. We're going to have a double line as we go out back to our cars. Is that okay? You're going to stay behind me? Okay. So, the anticipating Purim this evening, there's really no need for the double line, actually. So those who wish to stay behind and put more earth into David's final resting place may do so. Others, if they choose, may return.